what does the Bible teach about slavery?
Teaches a bunch of things about slavery. And it is a sort of thing where I would say we need to spend a handful of time, because I would say that it is even there are aspects that are kind of easy to explain. There are other aspects that are difficult to explain. And given the American context of slavery, which was very racial oriented, that's almost like it's almost like a word that gives us highs right off the bat. Everybody gets the emotional response. But put it in the context of relativism. If it's all a social construct, what white Americans were doing in the slave trade, no big deal. You know what I mean? Or Europeans and Americans were doing social construct. Bam, no big deal. So from an objection standpoint, let's grant, for the sake of argument, that morality is a social construct, and that the Bible condones morality or slavery in an absolute, whatever grounds you want. Go ahead and kidnap, steal, all that sort of stuff. Do it. Well, that's just the Jewish social construct. They're not doing anything wrong, and so you can object to their social construct. So in order to say that this Jewish system of slavery is wrong, you need to have a criticism of which and if you just criticize it from your own social construct, you got to admit, well, it's just a preference type of thing. And since most people agree with me today, blah, 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 then that's kind of your out. So I would say, first of all, so what does the Bible say about it? There are difficult passages regarding slavery, especially Leviticus 25, that deals with passing on basically foreign slaves to your children and stuff like that, and those peoples. But I would say, first of all, every culture in some sense or another is going to have slavery. So even in the United States, if someone gets arrested, they're identified as a property of the state. I mean, throw a little orange jumper on, even called property of the state. Now, we don't call them slaves because, we hate that word, but they're de facto slaves. They're told when to sleep, when to work, when to do these things. And so when we're looking at this term slave, what do we mean by it? So I would say a couple things. When it comes, at least with the Hebrews in Exodus chapter 21, so when the Bible says thou shalt not steal, it's reasonable to think that applies to people. So I can't steal your bike, but I can steal you. Seems pretty preposterous, you know what I mean? And so this idea that we have this term, I believe it's aved in the Hebrew, that is used for the term slave, but it covers a bunch of different relationships that can be had. And so I'll start with the Ten Commandments, thou shalt not steal. So I'm going to go ahead and say that includes people, not merely property, but includes people. And so if you're not to covet your neighbor's wife, his property, those sorts of things, those things are intertwined. And so if I'm coveting you and your labor, and so I'm going to steal you, I would say, well, it's a violation of the commandment. But within that, it also says this in Exodus 21, verse 16. Whoever steals a man and sells him, and anyone found in possession of him shall be put to death. And so if your definition of slavery is one man going out stealing another man and taking him, well, according to biblical law, you get the death penalty for that. Now, there are other places. So you hop over to Exodus 22. It says, this is verse 2 in Exodus 22. If a thief is found breaking in and is struck so that he dies, there shall be no blood guilt for him. But if the sun has risen on him, there shall be blood guilt for him. He shall surely pay. If he has nothing, then he shall be sold for his theft. If the stolen beast is found alive in possession, whether it's an ox or a donkey or a sheep, he shall pay double. And so in that context, if I commit a crime against you and I can't pay you back, I'm sold as a slave. So let's just say I commit a crime, I break your phone or whatever, it's a $1,000 phone, I'm supposed to pay you double, I can't pay you double. So I become your slave until I pay you back. So you have me doing yard work, or maybe you have nothing for me to do, so you sell me to GM for the week, you know what I mean? And I put a week in a GM. And so in a sense, I would argue that biblical slavery, at least aspects of it, not all aspects of it, is kind of a system of restitution where the criminal is a slave to somebody, kind of more of an indentured servant than it is a straight up system of running around, kidnapping somebody, running them off, and putting them to hard labor. It's a person who's committed the crime. And I would want to argue that a system of biblical slavery like that is more just than the American prison system that locks men up, robs them of livelihoods, robs them of the ability to be productive, puts them in with a bunch of other criminals. There's a bunch of other factors that kind of go in. So I realize it's pretty foreign to our ear, but I think a system of restitution to the victims of crime, which the Bible seeks to do, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, is far more of a just system than the current American legal system, which still, in a sense, has slaves. Mm-hmm. We call them prisoners. So biblical slavery, I would say, is more complex. Now, you do have prisoners of war that end up becoming basically your servants and your slaves. And I think that's and I think those are difficult because we have a tendency to be pluralists and have this idea that we can all kind of live together. But when Israel was interacting with the nations, and they'd have wars and stuff like that, and they were also allowed to buy from their neighboring nations, and I think some of those things are still fairly difficult to tease out, and the implications of those. But I think part of that would be integrating those people into Israel, and God's even called to look after the Egyptian. You know what it was like to be foreigners and sojourners and slaves. So if you're going to have slaves, you're to treat them a certain way. So I still think there's difficulty in some of the texts, Leviticus 25 particularly. I think some of the things that we immediately have a response to in Exodus 21 are fairly simply, kind of in a sense, simply handling the context of Israel and the context of any culture. The challenge becomes when you have the foreigners who are maybe treated by a different measure. And off the cuff, I don't think I have the best answer in the world for that.
Yeah.